What if a $3 bag of turnip seeds could fix every late season you've ever blown? I would have laughed. I did laugh. His name was Earl, and he'd been growing purple-top turnips on his farm in Putnam County, Indiana, since before I was born. I met him at a feed store in Greencastle in the summer of 2019, and the conversation we had over a bag of 13-13-13 fertilizer might be the single most valuable 20 minutes I've ever spent in a parking lot. At the time, I was 5 years into managing a 65-acre lease in Owen County with 2 food plots, both planted in the same clover and chicory blend every single year, because that's what every food plot article, every bag of seed at Tractor Supply, and every YouTube video told me to plant. And my late season hunting was miserable. By mid-December, the clover was brown and dormant, the chicory was frozen flat. And the deer had shifted to standing corn on the neighboring farm a quarter-mile east. I'd sit in my stand on December evenings watching empty fields while I could hear deer crashing through the corn on the other side of the ridge. It was maddening. My trail cameras told the story. In November, I'd pull 40 to 60 photos per week of deer using my plots. By the second week of December, that number dropped to 8 or 9, and by January, it was sometimes 0. I was losing my entire herd to the neighbor's corn every winter, and no scent, no mineral site, and no amount of sitting in a frozen stand was going to fix it, because the problem wasn't where I was hunting. The problem was what I was growing. Earl listened to me complain for about 5 minutes and then said something I'll never forget. He said, "Son, you're feeding them salad in July and wondering why they leave for steak in December." He was right, and the more I thought about it, the more obvious it became. Clover is a spring and fall food source. It goes dormant when the ground freezes. A deer's caloric demand increases by 20 to 30% in cold weather because they burn energy just maintaining body temperature. By December, they don't want protein. They want sugar and digestible carbohydrates, which is exactly what a turnip bulb provides. I'm going to walk you through everything Earl taught me, the biology behind why it works, the specific planting method that costs under $30 for a full acre, the exact soil conditions that make or break the whole thing, and the one mistake that causes turnip plots to fail on 90% of properties where hunters try them. And stay for the end because there's a trick Earl showed me involving a shovel and a split turnip that turned a dead plot into a feeding frenzy in less than a week. That one trick alone is worth watching this entire video for. First, the biology. Turnips are a brassica, which is the same plant family as cabbage, kale, and radishes. What makes turnips different from every other brassica in a food plot is that they produce 2 distinct food sources from one plant. The leafy green top is high in crude protein. Research led by Dr. Craig Harper at the University of Tennessee measured turnip leaves at above 32% crude protein, with less than 19% acid detergent fiber, which is a measure of how digestible the forage is. Lower ADF means the deer extracts more nutrition per bite. To put that in perspective, all high-quality alfalfa hay runs about 17 to 20% crude protein. Turnip greens are nearly double that. The deer eat the greens first, usually starting in October, when the leaves are lush and the plot looks like a garden. That 32% protein is exactly what does need in early fall to build fat reserves before winter. And it's what bucks need to recover body weight after the rut. But the real weapon is underground. The turnip bulb, the root, is loaded with simple sugars and digestible carbohydrates. According to the same University of Tennessee study, the sugar levels in turnip taproots were relatively high, both before and after frost. And here's where it gets interesting. That study also tested whether frost actually converts starch to sugar in brassicas. Which is what every food plot company and every hunting magazine has been telling you for 30 years. The answer? No. The starch levels did not drop after frost, and sugar levels in the taproots didn't significantly change. The sugars were already there before the first freeze. The real reason deer hit turnip plots harder in December isn't because frost made the plant sweeter. It's because every other food source on the landscape went dormant or died. The clover is brown. The soybeans were harvested in October. The corn was combined by November. The natural browse is frozen. The turnip plot is the only thing still standing with 32% protein in the leaves and a sugar-loaded bulb in the ground. The deer don't choose turnips because turnips changed. They choose turnips because everything else disappeared. a whitetail's rumen. Their, which is the first chamber of their four-part stomach, contains bacteria specifically adapted to ferment plant sugars and starches into volatile fatty acids that the deer absorbs for energy. In cold weather, the deer's metabolic rate increases and the rumen bacteria work harder, demanding more fermentable substrate. A turnip bulb loaded with simple sugars is the ideal fuel for that bacterial engine. The deer isn't choosing turnips because they taste better. It's choosing turnips because the rumen is demanding high-energy fermentable material, and the turnip is the only thing on the landscape providing it. That's the transformative idea Earl handed me in that parking lot, and it changed how I think about every food plot I've planted since. You're not competing against other food plots. You're competing against the calendar. The hunter who has food standing in January wins. Everyone else is sitting over frozen dirt, wondering where the deer went. That biology, the specific nutritional chemistry that drives deer movement in every phase of the season, is what I organized into the Buck Hunter's Bible, along with 76 other field-tested techniques, 90 pages covering attractant chemistry, scent control, stand placement, habitat strategies, and a chapter on food plot science. Reference card in the back for the stand. Links in the description below, QR code on screen. The planting is almost embarrassingly simple, and that's part of why the commercial food plot industry doesn't push turnips very hard. There's not much money in a $3 bag of seed when you can sell a proprietary brassica blend for $40 per acre. A bag of purple top turnip seed costs $3 to $5 per pound at any farm supply store or co-op, and 1 pound covers roughly a quarter acre, about the size of a large backyard. For a full acre, you need about 4 pounds of seed, which means your entire seed cost for an acre of turnips is somewhere between $12 and $20. Think about that for a second. Under $20 for an entire acre of seed. Compare that to a commercial brassica blend from Mossy Oak Biologic or Whitetail Institute, which runs $30 to $50 per acre for a bag that contains turnips, radishes, and rape mixed together. You can buy the exact same varieties separately for a third of the price. My wallet has opinions about which option I'm going with. The variety you want is purple top turnip. This is the standard, and in the go-to brassica that food plotters across the country have tested for decades. There are fancier varieties like Dynamo and Barcant, and they work, but a Michigan Sportsman Forum poster, who tested multiple varieties side by side, couldn't detect a preference difference from the deer. Purple top is cheaper, widely available, and proven. I've never had a reason to buy anything else. Plant timing is everything. Earl's rule was 8 to 10 weeks before your expected first frost, which in most of Indiana and the Midwest puts you in mid-August. In the upper Midwest and northern states, plant in late July to early August. In the Southeast, you can push into September. Get it wrong by even 3 weeks, and you'll either have stunted plants that never produce a bulb worth eating, or overgrown plants that bolt and turn bitter before deer season. Earl planted his on August 15th every year, without exception. He said the date mattered more than the fertilizer. The seed is tiny, about the size of a peppercorn, so it helps to mix 1 part seed with 2 to 3 parts sand before broadcasting. This prevents you from dumping too much in one spot and ending up with a patch of turnips so thick they compete with each other and produce marble-sized bulbs instead of the softball-sized ones you want. Broadcast the seed onto tilled soil and do not cover it. Turnip seed needs light to germinate. Just scatter it on top, and if you can time the planting before a rain, even better. A Trad Talk forum poster, who's grown turnips for years, confirmed he doesn't cover the seed at all and just plants before a predicted rain. No fancy drill, no cultipack, no special equipment. If you can spread grass seed on a lawn, you can plant turnips. That's one of the reasons the food plot industry doesn't push straight turnip seed very hard. There's nothing complicated to sell you a $200 no-till drill rental for. You just scatter it and let the rain do the work. Soil preparation is the one step you cannot skip, and it's the reason most turnip plots fail. Earl was religious about this. Before he planted anything, he tested his soil pH. Turnips need a pH between 6.0 and 7.0 to produce well. Below 6.0, and the plant can't access the nutrients in the soil, even if the nutrients are there. An Archery Talk poster, who had turnips ignored by deer for 2 seasons in a row, figured out the culprit was soil pH below 5.5. He limed the plot at 2 tons per acre based on his soil test results, replanted the following August, and the deer hammered it. His exact words were that lime is the magic ingredient nobody talks about. A soil test from your county extension office costs $15 to $25 and takes 2 weeks to come back. It tells you your pH, your phosphorus, your potassium, and exactly how much lime to apply per acre. That $20 test is the single highest return investment in the entire food plot process because it tells you whether your $15 worth of seed is going to produce food or just take up space. After liming if needed, apply a general fertilizer like 13-13-13 at planting, about 300 pounds per acre, roughly the weight of a large riding mower, and then hit the plot with 4600 urea 4 to 5 weeks after germination to push leafy growth. If you want bigger bulbs, add extra phosphorus, which is the middle number in the fertilizer. Phosphorus drives root development. A Northeast Indiana poster on Archery Talk, who follows this exact protocol, said his plots get destroyed by deer from mid-October through January every single year. And he's been running the same program for multiple seasons with consistent results. The thing Earl warned me about, and this is the part that saves most first-time turnip plotters from a wasted season, is that deer do not automatically know what a turnip is. If the deer on your property have never seen a turnip plot before, there is a very real chance they will walk right past it, around it, or through it, without eating a single leaf for the entire first season. This is documented across multiple forums. A poster on Archery Talk planted a full field of brassicas, including turnips in Ohio, and the deer walked around the plot instead of through it. He could see the tracks in the snow skirting the edges. He called the seed company, and they told him you have to show the deer what they are if the deer have never encountered turnips before. Another poster said it took 3 full years before the deer on his property figured out that turnips were food. 3 years. But once they learned, he said the deer wiped the plot out every season without fail. A Tennessee Deer Forum poster reported the same pattern. Deer ignored turnips the first year, started nibbling greens the second year, and by the 3rd year, they were digging the bulbs out of the ground. The trick, and this is what Earl taught me that nobody else had mentioned, is to accelerate that learning curve. When the first hard frost hits, go into your turnip plot with a shovel, dig up a dozen bulbs, split them in half with a knife, and scatter the halves across the surface of the plot. The exposed white flesh of the turnip releases a sweet smell that the deer can detect, and more importantly, it shows them what's under the ground. An Archery Talk poster confirmed this exact method. Split the turnips up and throw them down. 3 years ago, I planted turnips, and they never touched them. Local farmer told me to split them. I did, and the deer wiped them out in a week. That's the trick. 1 shovel, 1 knife, 15 minutes in the plot. The old farmer knew something that the seed companies never put on the bag. He said deer are like kids. You can't just put new food on the plate and expect them to eat it. You have to show them what it is. And the deer go from ignoring the turnips to destroying them within days. I did this on my Owen County lease the first year I planted turnips. And within 4 days, the camera at the plot edge went from 3 photos per day to 27. By the 2nd week of December, every doe group on the property was hitting the turnips between 3:30 p.m. and dark. And where the does go, the bucks follow. I had 3 different bucks on camera at that plot during the second rut phase in mid-December, including a heavy-beamed 8-point I'd never seen on any other camera all season. He showed up at 4:12 p.m. on December 14th, spent 11 minutes eating turnip greens, and came back the next 3 evenings in a row. I missed him by 1 day. He stopped coming December 18th, but I know exactly where to sit next December 14th. By late December, they were pawing the frozen ground to dig up bulbs. I've seen deer dig grooves into frozen soil with their hooves to get to turnip roots. Same behavior you see at a mineral site, which I've covered in other videos, except this time they're after sugar instead of salt. A Michigan Sportsman poster reported the same behavior, deer returning to old mineral sites and turnip plots as early as January, chopping at ice and frozen ground to get to the food underneath. The production numbers on turnips are staggering compared to other food plot plantings. A Michigan Sportsman Forum post cited up to 30,000 pounds of forage per acre from large variety turnips. Even standard purple top turnips in decent soil, will produce 10,000 to 15,000 pounds per acre when properly fertilized. That's 5 to 7 tons of food from a single acre. Compare that to clover, which produces roughly 2,000 to 4,000 pounds per acre, or winter wheat at about 3,000 to 5,000 pounds per acre. A 1-acre turnip plot can produce 3 to 5 times more food than a clover plot of the same size, and it produces that food during the exact months, December through February, when every other food source has disappeared. Clay Handback from Big Deer blog hunted a 2-acre turnip plot in central Indiana last December and watched 45 deer over 5 days. Does started filtering in at 4 p.m., followed by small bucks, and within an hour he had deer pulling up and eating brassicas across the entire plot. He watched bucks spar, work scrapes, and lip curl over late rut does, all within 100 yards of a 2-acre turnip patch in the middle of December, when most food plots in the county were frozen bare dirt. Yes, 45 deer in 5 days, from a 2-acre turnip plot, in December. That's not a coincidence. That's the power of being the only food source still standing when everything else is dead. There are 2 conditions where turnip plots fail that you need to know about. The first is soil pH below 6.0. I already covered this, but it bears repeating because it's the #1 reason plots fail and the #1 thing most hunters skip testing. The second is in the deep south where winters are mild and other food sources never fully go dormant. If you're hunting in South Georgia or South Alabama, where green browse is available year-round, turnips have to compete with natural forage that never dies, which reduces the draw. In those areas, a deer may eat the greens casually, but never develop the dependence on the plot that you see in the Midwest and Northeast, where the landscape goes completely brown by Thanksgiving. In mild winters, even in the Midwest, if there's an above-average acorn crop, the deer may not hit turnips as hard because they still have natural mass to eat. It's a competition for stomach space, and acorns win when they're available. But in a normal to poor mast year combined with cold weather, which is most years in most of the whitetail range, a turnip plot becomes the single most visited location on the property. And even in good mast years, the acorns are gone by mid-December. The turnips are still there in January. Everything in this video, plus about 60 more field-tested techniques, are in The Buck Hunter's Bible. Plant science, attractant chemistry, all scent control, stand placement, rut phase tactics. Reference card in the back. It's in the description below, QR code on screen. The one thing Earl said that stuck with me more than anything else, and I think about it every time I look at my November trail cam photos compared to my December ones, is that most hunters plant for the season they enjoy hunting, and then wonder why they lose deer during the season that actually produces the biggest bucks. The late season, December and January, is when the oldest, most cautious bucks on the property finally become predictable because their caloric needs override their survival instincts. A mature buck that won't walk past your stand in daylight during October will walk right through a turnip plot at 4 p.m. in January because he's burning 4,000 to 5,000 calories a day just staying warm. But he'll only do it if the food is there. If your plots are frozen clover and dead chicory, he's eating at your neighbor's standing corn instead. And you're sitting in an empty stand blaming the deer for being nocturnal when the real problem is you grew the wrong thing. My first turnip plot was a half-acre. I spent $8 on seed, $15 on fertilizer, $12 on lime. Total investment, $35. That half-acre produced more late-season deer sightings than the 2 acres of clover I'd been maintaining for 5 years, at a cost of roughly $200 per year in seed, fertilizer, and herbicide. My wife asked me why I was so excited about a root vegetable. I told her it was worth more than every bottle of attractant I'd bought in 20 years of hunting. She looked at me the way she always does when I talk about deer, which is politely but with visible concern for my mental health. The bag of purple top turnip seed is still $3 at the co-op. The 13-13-13 fertilizer is $15 for a 50-pound bag. A soil test is $20. For under $40, you can put in a half-acre plot that will hold deer on your property through January, when every other hunter in your county is staring at empty fields. Earl passed away in the fall of 2022. I heard about it from the guy at the feed store where we first met. I never got to tell him that his turnip advice produced more late-season encounters in 3 years than everything I'd tried in the previous 15. But I still plant purple tops every August and every December when the camera lights up with bucks pawing frozen ground at 3:30 in the afternoon. I think about a 77-year-old farmer in a feed store parking lot who knew more about deer hunting than anyone I'd ever met, and he'd never sat in a tree stand in his life. He just knew what to grow and when to grow it. And for $3 a bag, he changed every late season I'll ever hunt. One bag of purple top turnip seed, one soil test, one afternoon with a broadcast spreader, and the deer that used to leave your property in December will still be standing in your plot in January, pawing the frozen ground at 3:30 in the afternoon, while the guy on the next property over is wondering where they all went. You already know the answer. They're eating turnips, and now you know how to grow them. August is coming. The seed is $3, and Earl was right.